Hello, dear friend. We live in such a time that you can be a good person. You can put forth all the effort you can. You can do each of the things you need to do properly and correctly. And you can strive not to harm other people's rights, yet you may still not be as successful as bad people. You may not be as wealthy as them. It truly is a curious era. That is to say, when you are a bad person, when you do not follow the rules, when you are involved in lies and deceit, these things may not be obstacles at all. In fact, they can sometimes carry you even further ahead. And again, it is a curious time, one in which bad people are defined and marketed as very good people by large crowds on the outside. This inevitably disappoints good people a little. A person says, "Look, I did everything I could. I did it properly. I did not harm anyone. I completed all my duties without fail." But then you see someone getting ahead through connections, someone through lies, someone through a fake diploma, and they have moved several steps ahead of you. This makes a person both angry and resentful. It is at this point that I advise you not to give up or become resentful. This is actually the purpose of this video. I will talk about how the world system works somewhat like this, and why bad people tend to be more successful. After discussing the reasons for this, I also want to talk about how you, as a good person, can actually be successful without being bad, without lying, without stealing, how you can stand out and put yourself forward. If you are ready, let us begin. First, I want to say this. Human beings lived in small communities for a long time, perhaps thousands of years. Groups of 100 people, 150 people, sometimes even much smaller. Now, when living within such a group, everyone knows each other. Everyone greets one another. People are more or less aware of each other's lives, and if you did something wrong, if you caused a moral problem in society, that small community you belong to would punish you by excluding you, and perhaps even by causing you physical harm. And this brought people to a certain moral point. I need to be careful about being a good person here. I need to follow all the rules. And if, say, you lied, did not pay your debts, stole, or set your eyes on someone's honor, in such a situation, society would exclude you. Having lived this way for thousands of years, our brains evolved in the following direction. I am at the point of doing everything correctly and properly in order to be a good person. So goodness has somewhat of a biological root, born from living this way over many long years. But then society began to change very rapidly. Now we actually live in very large groups. We live in cities of millions, 10 million, 20 million people, yet you do not even know your neighbor in the same building. And at that moment, a decision you make at your workplace, do you know what happens? It can cause someone on the other side of the world to lose their job. The old-fashioned methods have changed a little. We are now in a completely different place. In the old days, in village life, when you did something wrong, the effect of that wrongdoing was visible right there in that environment. But think about it now. You are a war pilot for America, stationed somewhere in the Arab world on an American base, not a particularly dangerous place. Your family is there too. A fairly safe place. You go to your shift, you go to your watch. They tell you there is a mission somewhere. They show you some things on the radar. You might even be a good person at heart, but you go and drop bombs on a number of locations. You come home in the evening. You have dinner with your family. Then you find out on the news that you bombed a school full of civilian children. But perhaps that person felt no guilt at all in that moment. Because what they did was wrong, yet since they did not see the consequences firsthand, they feel no responsibility. Now, do you know what happened when things became like this? When those old-fashioned moral judgments disappeared because people drifted apart from one another and we entered a marketing age, the effect of that marketing age somehow opened up space for the people we call narcissistic, Machiavellian, and psychopathic. And we are at a point where you can be the worst person in the world, yet define yourself as an incredibly charitable human being. You can be an arms dealer and still present yourself as a philanthropist, a TEDx speaker. Life has come to such a point. But is that all? I want to talk a little about these narcissistic, psychopathic, and Machiavellian traits, because this is one of the most important characteristics that allows bad people to succeed. Now, when we say narcissistic, Machiavellian, and psychopathic, these three are often mentioned together, and they even have a rather fitting name. They are referred to as the Dark Triad. And think of it like a sauce in some people, a little of this, a little of that. These three personality traits can be present in very high amounts. What are they exactly? For example, what we call Machiavellianism is essentially self-interest and opportunism. People with this trait have a particular characteristic. When they meet you, they do not look at the emotional connection they are forming with you in that moment. Instead, they think, where can Thomas be useful to me? If Thomas is someone who can be of use to me within the next few moves, I start getting close to Thomas. They do not see Thomas as a human being. They use Thomas as an opportunity and a means to an end. It is as if they pulled a chess piece to their side. What do? They plan every stage strategically and act in a very self-serving way. If they need something from you, you are the best person in the world. They eat with you, hang out with you, buy you gifts. But the moment their business with you is done, you are as good as nothing to them. And they feel very little guilt about it. The issue with narcissism is actually this. Before you realize that narcissistic people are the way they are, there is a very high chance you will admire them. When a narcissistic person enters a room, they appear extremely self-confident. They speak very well, even if they have little or no ability for empathy. Do you know what happens? They can imitate empathy beautifully. And in that moment, you might think you have just met the most successful, most charismatic, most benevolent person in the world. And we know that narcissistic people tend to receive more positive interview outcomes compared to normal people who present their qualities in a reasonable and balanced way. And what we call psychopathy, the lack of conscience, the lack of empathy, if they have used you up and discarded you, it simply does not matter to them in that moment. If your life somehow derailed, if you fell into financial hardship, if you became unemployed, none of that matters at all. People like this can, for example, lay off 1,000 people, lay off 10,000 people in one go. And what happens? Well, in such cases, these kinds of people are actually preferred among the masters of the capitalist system in particular. They do not get their own hands dirty. People like this just get done what needs to get done, no hesitation. And because of this, they start climbing those career ladders very quickly. You might be a far more talented and knowledgeable person than them at that moment, but they take the horse and cross to Uskudar before you even blink. And good people, unfortunately, have one bad trait. Before every decision, they overthink. They ask, is this the right decision? Is this the right decision for my family? Will this harm other people? And thinking so much slows them down. And in the system we live in, slowness is one of the least appreciated qualities. But the people we call bad do not think at all. Will I harm someone? Will I upset someone? Will it cost someone their life? None of that matters. If it suits their interests in that moment, bang, bang, bang. They do everything they need to do. And within a company, within an organization, people who do everything quickly, without thinking, who can take risks, are rewarded by the system. Because there is no tolerance for slowness. Everything that needs to be done must be done fast. And this makes them luckier when it comes to being successful. And emotional immunity. Good people tend to be a little emotional, unfortunately. I cannot say this for every good person, but some have a more emotionally sensitive nature. And at some point, when they fail, when they are rejected, when they have a bad experience at school or work, they sit with it internally and dive into a kind of inner reckoning. They ask themselves, did I do something wrong? They hurt me. They treated me this way. They took what was mine. They personalize it. They get emotional. They might even fall into a depressive state, and it takes them a little time to pull themselves together. There is a significant loss of time before moving on to the next mission, the next venture. But the people we call bad, they do not care about any of this. Do you know that? In fact, there's a Leonardo DiCaprio film, Catch Me If You Can, if I remember correctly, which tells the story of a con man. In it, he commits so much fraud. In romantic relationships, he wants to be a pilot and just does it. No remorse, no guilty conscience whatsoever. But what happens when things go badly somewhere? The very next day, he can move on to something completely different, as if nothing ever happened. This has to do with the fact that they are emotionally thick-skinned, so to speak. And I have, without really meaning to, placed myself in the category of good people. I cannot be the one to decide that. Others decide that, of course. But on my own behalf, I can say this. It is hard to internalize a bad experience, to sit with it and process it. But bad people, as I said, do not care at all. The next day, they just carry on. Bang, bang, moving forward. Is there a difficult situation right now? That is someone else's problem, they say. They take no responsibility for themselves whatsoever. And one more thing. Bad people are masters of framing. They are incredibly professional when it comes to framing. What we mean by framing is the ability to sell what you have done. Think of it this way. Let's say you need to lay off 1,000 or 10,000 people. Now, how are you going to say that? The people we call bad bring it to such a point that they say, if I had not laid off those 10,000 people, the remaining 100,000 would have gone hungry too. They say, I actually saved the company. They say, I demonstrated outstanding leadership here. Or take Stalin, for example. You caused the deaths of millions upon millions of people. You say, I sacrificed 1 million people to preserve and protect the survival of Soviet Russia, but I saved 100 million. In other words, they sell the terrible things they do so well that you end up saying, wow, look at what this person did. That is incredible. What an amazing thing to do. They can market even the most awful things they do in the most beautiful way. And unfortunately, in today's world, visibility and a loud voice always work far better than real talent. Good people, as I have emphasized a few times, are always overanalyzing themselves. While they are busy thinking and deliberating, the other person has already taken action and gotten everything done long ago. And good people tend to have a higher tendency to doubt themselves. But the people we categorize as bad, they do not really doubt themselves. If there is something that needs to be done in that moment, they shout, they make noise, they fight, they get dirty if they have to. And by the way, I think they have a biological trait in this regard. When they go home in the evening, they sleep like a baby. Nothing bothers them at all. But let's say you are going through some tension. You lose 3 nights of sleep over it. And by the way, this is not something that can easily be changed. If that is your temperament, that is just how you continue. Unfortunately, that is one aspect of it. And we are at a certain point now. We are in the age of perception. You are probably aware of the Epstein case. It has been quite heavily on our agenda lately, and it is an incredibly horrifying world. But perhaps 10 or 20 years ago, they might have been calling him a philanthropist, a famous investor, a businessman. In other words, the worst people in the world can present themselves as the best, and they can be perceived that way on social media and in mainstream media as well. Unfortunately, we live in such a deceptive time. So, given that bad people have so many traits that open up opportunities for them, how can good people increase their own chances? How can they stand out more? But first, I want to say this. When bad people fall, they fall very hard. It could be a dictator. It could be a businessman. It could be an arms smuggler. Think of any bad person. On the outside, they may be living a glittery, glamorous life, but at some point they hit a wall. In the long run, they do not end up as winners. Good people may not seem to be winning much in the short term, but in my opinion, if they also do what I'm about to suggest, they eventually reach the place they deserve in life, even if a little late. So, there is no need to sell your soul or become a bad person in order to succeed. As I said, I want to emphasize this once more. Bad people mostly lose in the long run. And do you know what the worst case scenario is? At the funeral, the imam asks the congregation whether they forgive the deceased, and someone from the back, heartbroken, says, I do not forgive. That is where it ends up. I believe in this. Being a good person should not be seen as a disadvantage. My first piece of advice for good people is this. There is a concept we call empathy and sympathy. Do you know what empathy means? It means understanding the feelings of the other person, but not drowning in those feelings. Sympathy, on the other hand, means pitying them, being consumed by the desire to help them. This prevents us from making the right decisions. You are a manager, a leader. Of course, you need to understand how the other person feels. But sometimes, without violating anyone's rights or causing harm, even if the other person's feelings shake you to the core in that moment, you still have to do what needs to be done. The other person may be upset. The decisions you make will not always be met with applause, and you are wonderful, you are perfect, what a great person you are. You need to factor that in, I think. But when you operate from sympathy, you feel compelled to keep everyone happy. You worry, I hope they do not get upset, I hope they do not get hurt. That is life. Even as a good person, you will sometimes have to disappoint people. You will cause some people to feel hurt. That does not mean you are a bad person. As I said, unfortunately, sympathy is not our guiding principle. Empathy should be our main principle, and I genuinely believe very strongly in a powerful concept. There is something called the courage to be disliked. If you always have a desire to be liked, always a desire to receive approval, do you know what happens? You avoid doing the right things out of fear of causing conflict. When that happens, you end up always pleasing people. But one thing must be fixed in your mind. Even though you are a good person, some people will not like you. Some will criticize you, some will talk behind your back. That is the nature of this. Even if you are the best leader in the world, a large portion of people will still not be satisfied with you. I do not know if you watched the Elvis Presley film. At his concerts, they sold souvenirs: Elvis t shirts, cups, badges. But do you know what else was there? I hate Elvis badges. The manager had calculated it. Alongside people who love Elvis, there will always be people who do not. Real life is the same. Even if you become the Elvis of your field, there will be people who hate you. You need to accept this with maturity. And one of the biggest mistakes good people make, they have an idea but do not share it until it reaches 100% perfection. Because of this, people who simply take action overtake you while you are still stuck at the idea stage. My suggestion? The 80% rule. If an idea has matured to 80%, put it out there even if it has gaps. Let people know it is yours. Receive feedback and start taking action. Do not waste time chasing perfection. Closely connected to this is being visible. If you are doing the work, promote yourself. Not in a raw, direct way, but subtly and indirectly when the moment is right. How hard you worked, what you accomplished, you need to say these things out loud. You need to market yourself. If you do not, unfortunately, things get difficult. And one of the most important things, build alliances. Cooperate with people who share your vision. You invest in them. They invest in you. As your friendships grow, you will lift each other up at the right moments. There is an expression: never eat alone, even at lunch. Building friendships and collaborations is incredibly important. Last thing, understand the system. People who just complain bitterly tend not to be very successful, even if they are good people. This is not specific to any one country. It is like this everywhere in the world. You do not need to be a bad person to navigate it, but read about influence and manipulation techniques. Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, Machiavelli's The Prince. I think you absolutely must read them. Some methods are soft enough that anyone can apply them, but learn the darker ones too. Not to use them, but to protect yourself and navigate accordingly. So, my dear friend, should a good person act like a bad person to succeed? I am curious about your thoughts. Write in the comments and I will reply in the first few days. Take very good care of yourself. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe. See you next time. Goodbye.